Since Star Wars takes place in a galaxy far, far away, there aren't any Earth religions in the saga. Sure, there are broad categories like monotheism, polytheism, pantheism, animism, dualism, agnosticism, and mysticism, but no actual religions show up in the films that weren't created for the fictional universe. However, through the use of coding, many real-world religions have proxies in the movies and extended materials. Briefly, for those unaware, coding is the use of cultural or physical signifiers to identify fictional beings with non-fictional categories. This can be toxic or non-toxic, and is itself neutral. In A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back, Obi-Wan and Yoda are both living in huts with few physical ties. They aren't connected to their communities, and they take on simple clothing. They advocate for peaceful solutions to problems, but still practice martial arts. Now obviously they do not believe in nirvana, or focus on the cessation of their suffering. The actual religion of the Jedi is much more dramatic dualism. But the Jedi, in the original trilogy at least, are coded as if they are Shaolin Buddhist monks. Again, this isn't what they actually are, or even close to what they believe, but what they remind the audiences of in the real world, for better or worse. The Lanai caretakers on Ahch-To in The Last Jedi also live simple lives. They do not possess technology. They wear modest clothing and live communally, and are exclusively women. They work alongside Luke Skywalker in care to the Jedi Temple. They aren't actually Christian, but they still resemble nuns, particularly Franciscan nuns, without actually believing in a singular god. And I want to stress this, as the coding is present, even without the religion being comparable. Now, Barriss Offee is a Jedi who is coded as Muslim. Not only does she wear Jedi robes reminiscent of hijab, she has face tattoos similar to those of Bedouin women, and hand tattoos resembling henna. She is portrayed by Nalini Krishan, an actress with Indian and Nepalese ancestry, so many also believe she is coded as South Asian, and her skin color has been described as golden and olive. More than this, the coding goes beyond the physical signifiers. Barriss, in the extended universe, is a healer, working alongside the Star Wars equivalent of the 407 Seventh. Despite being sci-fi, Star Wars maintains a sort of pre-industrialist fantasy feel, but with melee weapons and magic, and in a pre-industrialist medieval setting, medicine was often more advanced in Muslim cultures. She is also a diplomat, and in her first appearance, wows an audience by performing a lightsaber dance, which has real-world precedents to Bedouin sword dancing. And beyond that, she's just an awesome, complex character. She's a Jedi, but she's a lot more proactive than many, while still remaining relatively pacifistic. She's compassionate towards the clones and friends with her non-Jedi co-workers. She also has a checkered history, struggling with drug abuse, and has a relatable, overactive internal monologue. She's likable, fun, and interesting, and a lot of Muslim fans of Star Wars have claimed her as positive representation. However, as noted by Tumblr user Avery at Diversity in Star Wars, several non-Muslim individuals have advised against headcanoning Barriss as Muslim, and if you're a fan of Star Wars beyond the movies, you might know why.
Chaos in 2008. 5 years after the release of Revenge of the Sith, Star Wars returns to the screen, with Pennsylvanian cowboy Dave Filoni at the reins, and with an overwhelmingly white cast, Star Wars The Clone Wars sets out to reinvigorate interest in Star Wars, and attract Disney's attention, no matter the implications made along the way.
Now, despite having some interesting ideas and not really being that bad of a show, The Clone Wars dropped the ball more than once when it came to unfortunate coding or questionable choices. For example, instead of looking like Maori men with New Zealand accents, the clones are paler-skinned Australians voiced by a white American. The clones also go from being complicit, independent thinkers in the rise of the Empire by posing as loyal soldiers, to being subservient warriors switched into brainwashed assassins at a button press, almost as if they enjoy their slavery. Jango, instead of being a Mandalorian, was retconned into being a thief, and Mandalore was retconned into being, rather than a multicultural planet with diverse skin colors, a white monoculture. Also, while old Mandalorians were proud warriors, new white Mandalorians are peaceful nobles. The difference was even so jarring that longtime Star Wars author Karen Traviss left the company. Of course, Mandalore pales, literally, in comparison to the Night Sisters. Formerly questionable homages to Wicca, what with two gods. At least Night Sisters were just Force users that focused on nature. Potentially offensive, still sexist, but at least not utilizing real-life religious stereotypes for their abilities. However, with the Clone Wars episode Massacre, Night Sisters utilize both, as described on official concept art, voodoo dolls and zombies, elements associated with Haitian Vodou. The concept that a doll one can poke with needles is able to harm its likeness originates from European folk religion, but this is still described as voodoo. And while zombies originate in Haitian folklore, they are not described as being products of Vodou. Now, these stereotypes are both out of place in Star Wars and disrespectful to a real religion practiced today, and quite frankly, tasteless. But don't worry, I haven't forgotten about this video's true topic. I only bring up Mandalore and Dathomir as precedents for bad coding in the Clone Wars. Now, on to Barriss. Barriss received a major overhaul for the Clone Wars. Most noticeably, she is de-aged, once the same age as Anakin, now several years his junior. She is still a Padawan, while Anakin is now a Jedi Master. While this was obviously done to give Ahsoka a contemporary, it is questionable why the writers and directors would choose a character canonically about the same age as Anakin, instead of creating a new one. This is admittedly a minor point, but it establishes that they are willing to change things. In her first episode, Weapons Factory, Barriss is shown to be much more timid than her EU self. She is respectful and polite, which isn't bad, of course, but it relies on the stereotype that Muslim women are quiet and submissive. Brain Invaders comes off worse, as the chance for Barriss to do some medical work is present, and neglected, as she instead relies on the actions of others, without any proactive medicinal observation. Even worse is her willingness to succumb to death, both in Weapons Factory and Brain Invaders. While she is shown to be smart, she is ultimately passive, again exemplifying the stereotype often held in America of Muslim students being more intelligent but less driven. American-coded Ahsoka isn't as smart as foreign Muslim-coded Barriss, but at least she doesn't give up or give in to more powerful forces. I don't want to imply necessarily that I believe the team behind these episodes intentionally gave a Muslim-coded character these stereotypical characteristics, but it's possible their implicit beliefs, supported by culture, fed into the portrayal. After all, none of Barriss's previous appearances are as a demure wallflower, and it might just have been random characteristics applied to her, since they contradict previous appearances, but the characteristics match with stereotypes held of women who cover their hair. The most offensive part of Barriss's Clone Wars appearance comes in her second arc, in episodes 5, 17 to 20. In this arc, the Jedi Temple is bombed by an unidentified assailant, killing an unknown number of individuals. This assailant murders their accomplice, frames Ahsoka, and murders several more soldiers to keep up the ruse. Now this assailant is Barriss Offee. Barriss isn't given a complex reason as to why she commits these crimes, as she is supposedly done with the Jedi enabling violence and death and falling to the dark side. That's why she kills people violently while committing evil actions. This is terrible writing used to shock, but is unconcerned with consistent characterization or logical story progression. It also doesn't even shock because Barriss shows up for the first time in 3 years to suddenly be in the plot. Of course, though, the problem beyond lazy writing is that we have a Muslim-coded character bombing a temple because she disagrees with the religious interpretations of its inhabitants. I probably don't have to explain it, but the biggest stereotype about Muslims is that they are terrorists. The team at the Clone Wars took a complex Muslim-coded character from the EU and turned her into a simplified, offensive caricature, one note and bland. I think this is especially reprehensible since the Clone Wars is a children's show, or at least marketed towards children, and children can often be more affected by media than adults, and shouldn't have to go through this kind of representation. But as previously mentioned, Avery at Diversity in Star Wars says, you don't have to stop enjoying Barriss Offee, or thinking of her as a Muslim-coded character. Barriss was still great, before the TV show, and those stories still exist. She was coded as a Muslim with compassion and conviction, and that's worth something. This goes for anything in Star Wars that changes after the Disney buyout. Sure, critique the new stuff. We all know I just did. But the stories you enjoyed aren't going anywhere, and the joy you can get from them is worth exploring. And just maybe, Barriss's time isn't over yet.